Well, hello again. As you've probably already guessed, that the title of the discussion today is why are human beings so obsessed with the um, afterlife, and what are the consequences of that obsession? Well, firstly, if you are a Jehovah's Witness, you'll then say, well, I don't know what you're talking about, Terry, because we were never obsessed with the afterlife at all. We believe that we were never going to die, so how could we have an obsession with an afterlife? Surely an afterlife comes after you've died. Well, technically, you're absolutely right, but unfortunately, for millions of Jehovah's Witnesses, their only hope now is an afterlife because, of course, they've died. And they've died in the belief and the hope that their afterlife, their life after death, would see them coming back to a paradise earth. And your own obsession with afterlife went to such an extreme view that all of you, when you were a Jehovah's Witness, would have carried on your possession a little card that if you were knocked down and there was nobody, around to state what your views were, and if you were unconscious at the time, and that you needed a blood transfusion, that you were going to tell medical staff that under no circumstances would you take blood because you were more concerned with securing your afterlife than the very life that you had. So that's how our obsession went so far that we've become martyrs for this faith in this afterlife. And of course, Jehovah's Witnesses are not the only religion that allows people to be martyrs for a belief in the afterlife. Of course, we know there are other faiths which, people will blow themselves to smithereens because of this promise of the afterlife. Now, where does this come from? Where does this afterlife come from? Why do we need it so much? Well, let's consider, for instance, the other people or creatures that live on this earth. In other words, the animals. The animals, there's more of them than us. They've been here a lot longer than we've been here, and they'll probably be here a lot longer after we've, rubbed ourselves off the earth. And yet animals do the very same to us. They have social structures, social groups. They eat, they drink, they sleep, they shit, and they reproduce as well. And yet they go through all of their life and they never just sit down and think, ooh, I wonder where I go when I die. They don't do that. They just get on with their life. And if they could talk, if we could talk to the animals, if we could talk to the animals, I'm sure the animals would say to us, hold on a second guys, you kill us for sport, you kill us for food, you use our skins and our fur for fashion accessories. How come you're the only species on this planet who think that you're getting an afterlife? How come you haven't just accepted that this life that you have is all you're ever going to have? Why are you so special? Why are you so special that you think you're going to go somewhere else? Why is it? Why you and not us? Because at the end of the day is, a lot of us live longer than you do. We can fly and you can't fly. We're stronger than you, faster than you, better eyes, better ears. We can swim underwater, and a one-to-one will probably rip you to the pieces. And yet you think you're better than us, and you think you're going to go somewhere else when you die. But we don't. And they'd have a point. They would have an absolute point. Because they don't do that. Unfortunately, the difference between us and them is that we can think outside the box. And unfortunately, we spend most of our lives thinking of what happens to us when we get inside the box. And animals don't. They just live their lives till either they die of old age or they predate it. They just get on with living their lives. And we don't. And the difference between us is because unfortunately human beings are hardwired to believe in the afterlife. And animals are hardwired to do other things which are just as inexplicable and unexplainable. For instance, under my porch I have a family of swallows. They spend 6 months of their lives in Africa. If you look at the distance between Scotland and Africa, it's a hell of a long journey. But they come over here around about every April, and they come back to the same nest that they were born in, and they will rear, the next generation will rear their young. And round about beginning of July, the first brood get bumped out the nest because the parents want to have another brood. Then the individuals round about September, October time say, right, it's now time to go to Africa. But these are the chicks, the fledglings, you know, who have never been to Africa. So somehow they're hardwired to instinctively say, right, I've got to head south and head to Africa, to where my parents spend the winter, even though they've never been there before, and they don't have Google Maps. It's amazing. But humans, unfortunately, are born with this hardwiring to believe in this thing called the afterlife. So, you know, how can we prove that? Well, okay, it's quite simple. If you took groups of young people, spread them all over the world and kept them in isolation for maybe 500 years, just give them enough food to get by, and then they're on their own, with no scriptures, no, you know, nothing at all, no religious teachings, no beliefs, nothing. They're just in there. There you go. Get on with it. Survive. Raise a community or whatever it is. Now, some would fail, but a lot would work out because they'd adapt. But if you went back in 500 years' time as a social experiment, you would find that probably in most of those groups, all in isolation of each other, that each of them would have eventually had started, and it might even not even take 500 years, they would already have their own belief structure in place, and they'd already be believing in the afterlife, this obsession with the afterlife. Now, you know, why is that the case? Well, for instance, they'd see the sun rising and think, what's that? What's that there? And why does it go down lower and lower and lower as we get to the colder part of the year? And why do my crops not grow when in that part of the year? And why does it look angry sometimes? And what's that other body called, the moon? And why sometimes is there an eclipse or a partial eclipse or a red moon? You know, are they angry with me for some reason? Is that why my crops failed? Is that why my daughter's ill? Is that why my daughter's died? Is it coincidental that with the blood moon that my daughter died? Well, maybe I need to appease whatever this heavenly object is. What are all those stars in the what are those twinkling things in the heavens? Those what we call stars. The same thing. I've just seen a beautiful creature in the forest, which coincidentally saw that the next day my child started getting better. Maybe this was, you know, too much of a coincidence. Maybe I should build an altar and start worshipping this creature. Or my wife's just died, or my dad's just died. They were too much of a personality for that to be it. Surely they must go on. Surely they must go on to something else. Maybe they ascend up to where, you know, in the stars. Maybe they become, you know, part of these wonderful animal creatures. And that's the way it works. And within a short space of time, you'd have people then carving things in stone, putting things in wood, and eventually working on to some, you know, writing, you know, different rules and regulations. And that's how a worship's established, religion's established. At the end of the day, all of these people would believe in some form of an afterlife. And you can say to yourself right now, you're talking complete bollocks, because that is bollocks, that's not going to happen. Well, sorry, the proof is it already has happened. Yes, that's what has happened in the past in our history. You got groups of people who eventually became secluded and were allowed to then create their own belief system based on what they saw. And it all ties in with getting blessed during their life and then getting further blessed when they die. This obsession with the afterlife. You look at all the religions that used to exist maybe 5,000, 4,000 years ago, and it's all the same. And we know that because we can look at their writings, we can look at papyrus and hieroglyphs, and we can look at wood carvings and stones, and it's all there. All over the world, you can look at different places. Even where they never built wonderful structures, if you're really wealthy, wonderful structures which would ensure that in their afterlife you're all right. Like the pharaohs did, like the first emperor of China did, like the kings of the Greek empires did. Elaborate tombs, a lot of grave goods, so that in the afterlife they were all right. You then get people who were separated in the Americas and in Australia and New Zealand, and the Maoris who went there, the Aborigines in Australia, the Red Indians, if you can still call them that, in America. And instead of them building monuments and temples and altars, instead they have a more of an oral tradition, which is, it's the same thing that they've been teaching and believing for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, but it's orally taught. So they all the children know, they pass it on to their children. And it's the same thing, it's all built up with the afterlife, being blessed by certain creatures having certain spiritual qualities. It's exactly the same. But they've been isolated, they've all developed their own understanding, but at the end of the day is they all have the same thing in common. This afterlife, making sure that you're going to be looked after, that after you die you go into this afterlife. Now, it's incredible when we think about all the religions that used to exist and how only a couple really dominate these days based on maybe the Muslim faith or the Christian faith. If you look at the Christian faith especially, you'll see that the Greek Empire, they erected all these temples wherever they conquered, and made them, and each temple was to the Greek gods. And then of course the Roman Empire then became the stronger empire, conquered the Greek Empire and all their territories, and then the old Greek temples became temples for the Roman gods. In time, of course, what happened was the Roman Empire got converted to Christianity, so all of a sudden all these temples became Christian churches instead. And then in time, all the Christians in Europe then went over to the Americas, went over and conquered because of their weaponry and their ability to use horses and gunpowder or whatever, went over to these people who've been in isolation for hundreds of thousands of years, who had their own version of a religion, a belief, and the afterlife, and then they went over there and forced them by gunpoint to revert to Christians. Be a Christian or be killed, or sometimes be a Christian and still get killed. And that's why Christianity is as big as it is today, just by the fluke of Rome conquering the Greek Empire, then going into also North Africa, spreading over Europe, and then conquering everybody in its wake, nearly north, apart from some people in a place called the north of Scotland, conquering everybody in their wake. And then once they converted to Christianity, all of a sudden then say, right, well, we're going to stop our little altars, we're going to just go to the one God, and this guy called Jesus Christ. And that's how Christianity spread. If it wasn't for the Roman Empire, being as massive as it was, and then key guys converted to Christianity, and then these guys going over to the Americas, Christianity would not be the big religion that it is today. And you wouldn't have all these people obsessed with making sure that they get into this version of the afterlife, which of course is heaven. The Muslims, again, you think, well, what happened to all the Egyptian religion? Where did all that go? All the religion in the Middle East? Well, it's the same thing. The Muslims took over these territories, that they were, and when they went in, it was a case of, right, you're a bunch of heathens, you believe what we say now, and converted a lot of these temples, even Christian churches, into mosques. So it's all a matter of the religions that we see today isn't because they were true, it shows how true these religions were. No, it just shows that at the end of the day is whoever was the most powerful empire or nation, that their form of worship was then forced on whoever they conquered. And that then comes down to what has been the benefits of this afterlife, if you think about it. How different would the world be if we never believed in this afterlife? Well, for a kick-off, if you think back to the fight between Christians and Muslims to control Jerusalem, that in the time of the Crusades, the Pope would say to everybody that was going, all the Christians that were leaving Europe, would say to them, I tell you what, if you go over there and conquer Jerusalem, there's no going to hell, there's no purgatory. If you die in this holy war, you're going straight up to heaven. So it's win-win if you're a Christian trying to conquer Jerusalem. They never did. For the Muslims, again, it's a holy war, making sure that Jerusalem doesn't fall into the hands of the Christians. And again, win-win for them. If they got killed straight away, they were promised to go straight to heaven. Even bringing it a little bit more up to date, World War I, you get men, part of the same religion, have the same obsession with this afterlife. Both sides of the trenches, writing to the mums, saying, we're going over the top tonight. If I don't survive, I know I'm going to a better place. I know I'm going to a better place. And we will be rejoined in that place at another time. And so they went over the top and got mowed down by machine guns or blown to smithereens because of this obsessive belief in the afterlife, thinking that if they die, they're all right. And that really is the problem that we've got, because thinking about, let's go back to our swallow friend the swallow. Our friend the swallow, as the temperatures in the earth rise, will eventually have to quickly adapt, like other creatures, to the situation here. It may become too hot in Africa, and it may come as it's getting warmer in Britain, so many swallows are now deciding to winter here. They're adapting. They've decided to not think about the life in Africa, but to concentrate on the life here and now, where they raise their family, where they live, and they're going to winter here. And in other words, they'll eventually adapt, and that's what they'll do. And when it comes to ourselves as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, that's what we need to do. We need to adapt to our changed circumstances. And many, when they come out of Jehovah's Witnesses, are absolute prime candidates to be pulled in by another cult, or to join another religion, or to become a born-again Christian. Because at the end of the day, this obsession with the afterlife has not gone away. They would have, we spent all that time, rejecting the thought of an afterlife in heaven. Then all of a sudden, when we reject the witnesses' teachings, when we say, well, hold on a second, the whole thing about staying on the earth forever, it's hardly mentioned in the Bible. There's more about heaven. So I'm confused. What am I going to do here? Because I've been rejecting the heavenly hope for all these years. And so they're in this horrible vacuum that they don't know where they're going to go when they die. And that leads them to other religions where they get born again. They say, right, okay, that's great. Now we can. Now all the sins I'm forgiven. All right. If I die tomorrow, I'm promised through Jesus' sacrifice that I will go and meet Him, the Father in heaven. That's all right, because of this obsession with the afterlife. Now, we need to adapt like the swallow. We need to finally realise that the life we have here at the moment is the only life we're ever going to get. The only reason why we have this obsession with the afterlife is because, to put it bluntly, we cannot, in our minds, accept the finality of our own death. We think, no, this can't be it. This can't be it. And when we have a mother and father who is, really a lively figure and a great character, you just think, no, that person's personality could not have just ended when they breathe the last breath. They must carry on somewhere else. They must carry on somewhere else. This can't be it. And so that's why we get obsessed with this afterlife, because our inability to accept death. And that is unfortunately what has led to where we are today. Let's just think about the Crusades. How many people would have voluntarily gone and joined the Crusades if they'd known that if you do get killed, trying to reclaim Jerusalem, that there's no afterlife? That's it, you're dead. How many people would have joined that army? How many people would have voluntarily joined up in World War One to fight in that war, knowing that if they died, get blown apart, that there is nothing else? How many people right now listening to this who are formerly Jehovah's Witnesses, if Jehovah's Witnesses have suddenly turned around and said, right, well, not turn around, let's just say that Jehovah's Witnesses never had a promise for an afterlife. There was none of this going to heaven. There was none of this paradise earth. In the case, all it was is Jehovah's Witnesses were an organisation where people would come together to try and encourage each other to follow Bible principles, still do the witnessing, still do the carting to bring more people involved, still have the governing body, still have the elder arrangements, still have the shunning, still have all the rules and regulations, all those things that you have to do, and no promise of an afterlife after that. How many people would be a Jehovah's Witness if that was the deal? How many people watching this now would say, well, honestly, we were only in it because of our obsession with ensuring our own survival after death, or surviving Armageddon when there's supposed to be this huge cull. That's why it's our obsession with making sure that we survive, we're survivors, that we can even conquer death by having an afterlife. And unfortunately, we've just not moved on. For 6,000 years we've been obsessing about this afterlife, and this belief is going nowhere fast. And I believe that if we were in a world that wasn't so obsessed with afterlife, if we just dealt with the here and now and what we have, I think we would be living in a better world. You wouldn't have all those religious wars for a kick-off. I think people might be spending their time doing better things, in their communities or what have you. There would still be wars, there'd still be people who would say, oh, I fancy that bit of land over there. Right, lads, let's go over and conquer it. If we lose our lives, well, shit happens, but if we conquer these guys, whatever, yes, that would still happen. I'm sure it would. But, I don't think we'd have the absolute carnage that we've had in the name of religion, and still have in the name of religion today. So if you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this now and you're thinking, oh right, oh no, this, I still, I need my afterlife. Really, you don't. You don't need to believe in afterlife. Just concentrate on what you've got. And I kid you not, people today are so blessed. I'd rather be living, and I've said this before, I'd rather be living right now than I would do maybe 100 years ago, and definitely no further back than then. For instance, I had my appendix bust whenever it was, 20 years ago. If you'd gone back maybe 100 years, I would have died. Probably would have died. Well, appendix or a problem, boo, 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 it's gone. I'm still here to tell the survivor's story. But, that's the case. Right now, if you wanted to go and visit Europe, cheap airplane, boom, you're over there in a couple of hours. Go back 50 years, could you have done that? No. Go back to all the history of Europe, there's been all loads of problems. And of course, planes didn't exist going back 200 years anyway. If you wanted to go to any other place, you'd have to take a boat. And if you survived the boat journey, which took months, heaven knows what was on the other side. I'd rather live right now. I'm thankful that that I'm alive right now, and I have this blessing of life passed on to me by my parents. I'm glad I've got it. And for those who think, oh, well, I want to leave, it doesn't seem right that I die and there's nothing of me that goes on. Well, you're wrong. Because anybody who has children or grandchildren, that's how you go on. That's the same thing with animals. It's the circle of life. You just go on and on and on and on. It keeps on going. And the difference is, when we look at maybe at our great-great-grandparents, there's probably maybe one black and white photograph, and you can go to the grave and it says, you know, Johnny Smith, born here, died here, was a carpenter. You have no idea what Johnny Smith was like. You've just got one picture of your old granddad. It tells you nothing. It might be a crap picture. He looks a bit of a mean dude. We know what pictures are like. Sometimes they're not flattering, and that's the way it works. But today, if you do social media or you keep, you've got your own private collections of stuff that private collection and stuff that you do outdoors. And then it can be that, your great-great-great-grandchildren can say, oh, they could follow this social media tree of life, to see the things that we did when we were younger, instead of thinking of as an old person. And if you're a Jehovah's Witness who thinks, no, I'm missing a sense of community, there's loads of places, loads of groups you can now join because of social media, and you can actually do something that will actually benefit the community. And the difference is, of course, is that if you join one of these clubs, imagine if you joined a tennis club, friends. I've always wanted to play tennis. You join a tennis club, after 6 months, actually, it's not for me, I think I'm going to join the badminton club. You just tell the tennis club people, I've decided tennis club's not for me anymore, I'm going into badminton. None of them are going to turn around to you and say, oh well, that means if you're abandoning the club, we can't talk to you anymore. In fact, we're going to shun you. It's not going to happen, Okay, fair dues. Maybe I'll see you there myself. If we need to go up for a drink, you might find greater love in the tennis club than you ever got in any sort of religious organisation. So, simply put, I think the consequences of our obsession with the afterlife has just led to so many horrors that I can't even begin to describe them. I think it holds us back. I think it holds us back from making the most of the life that we have today. And I think for anybody watching this, we need to embrace what we have, whatever lifespan we've got, and just make the most of it. Go and do things. Stop looking for the answers to questions when you're asking the wrong questions. The question shouldn't be is where do we go when we die? The question should be is what can I do to make the most of the life I'm only ever going to have, and it's this one right now. Anyway, I know a lot of people are not going to agree with my musings on the obsession with the afterlife, and it is only my point of view, but I've thought long and hard about this over the past 20 years, and when I left the Witnesses, I struggled, and now I'm quite happy in my belief that this is it, there's no afterlife, and I'm just going to make the most of this. So I can only encourage everybody watching this video to do the same. Don't be depressed. You don't need to have an afterlife to enjoy the life you've got. Make the most of it and go for it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll probably see you all another time. Bye bye.